No one knew that the woman they humiliated that day would be the reason their world collapsed before the night ended. No one imagined that the quiet woman in the plain dress sitting beside waiters and dish carriers was married to the most powerful man connected to the groom. No one guessed that the wedding meant to celebrate pride and status would turn into a lesson written in shame and regret. Vanessa arrived at the grand wedding hall with calm steps, wearing a simple pastel dress, no diamonds. No designer labels, no loud makeup, just grace in its purest form. She came only to support her husband, Ethan Cole, who had told her gently that this wedding was important because the groom was his younger brother. Adrian Cole. The hall glittered with chandeliers, gold-trimmed chairs, and flowers flown in from overseas. Rich laughter echoed everywhere as the bride's family showed off their wealth and connections. Vanessa stayed close to the entrance, waiting for Ethan, who had been pulled away by a sudden business call. Unknown to everyone present, Ethan Cole was not just a successful man, he was a silent billionaire who owned major real estate, banks, tech firms, and logistics companies across the city. He avoided spotlight, lived simply, and trusted actions over words. Vanessa was used to being underestimated because Ethan never flaunted his power, and she never wore it like armor as guests were escorted to their seats. A woman from the bride's side scanned Vanessa from head to toe. Her eyes narrowed with judgment and whispered to another woman who smirked and nodded. Soon a wedding coordinator approached Vanessa with forced politeness and said, "Family seating is reserved. Please follow me." Vanessa smiled politely and followed, thinking nothing of it until she was led past the decorated tables, past the stage, past the honored guests, and stopped near the back where catering staff were seated on plastic chairs. A young waiter looked confused as Vanessa was told to sit there. Some staff exchanged glances, realizing something was wrong. Vanessa felt the sting of humiliation, but chose silence. She reminded herself that she was here for Ethan and Adrian, not for pride nearby. The bride's aunt laughed, saying, "These days anyone can walk into weddings dressed like that," while another added, "At least she knows her place." Vanessa lowered her eyes, breathing steadily, unaware that this single act of cruelty was about to awaken a storm. The bride, Lily, was busy taking photos, unaware that her family had just insulted the woman who shared a bed with the man financing half the city. Ethan returned moments later, scanning the hall for Vanessa. His eyes darkened when he found her sitting among staff, his jaw tightened, not in anger. Alone but in clarity, he walked toward her calmly, every step echoing authority that no one recognized yet. As he reached her side, Vanessa looked up and smiled softly, saying, "It's fine, really." Ethan took her hand and said, "No, it's not." And with that simple sentence, the fate of everyone in that hall quietly changed, because respect once broken demands a price, and Ethan Cole always collected what was owed. Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not create a scene, yet the air around him shifted as if power itself had stood up from its seat. Guest nearby felt something change, though they could not name it. He guided Vanessa gently from the staff chairs and walked her toward the main family table. Every step felt heavier than the last for those watching. Whispers began spreading like fire through dry grass. Who is she? Why is he bringing her here? Someone from the bride's family stepped forward, trying to block them, saying, "Sir, this table is reserved." Ethan looked at him once, a calm, cold look that carried years of authority and success, and said, "She is my wife, and this is my family table." Silence followed, the kind of silence that exposes truth. The groom, Adrian, noticed the tension and rushed forward, his face lighting up when he saw Ethan. He embraced him warmly and greeted Vanessa with respect, calling her sister-in-law loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Confusion rippled through the crowd. The bride's mother stiffened, her smile fading as she realized something was terribly wrong. She forced a laugh, saying, "Oh, you must be mistaken. We did not know." Vanessa smiled politely again, her dignity untouched, but her eyes now clear and sharp. Adrian frowned, asking what happened, and before anyone could lie, the catering manager nervously explained how Vanessa had been seated with staff. A murmur of shock spread. Adrian turned pale. He looked at his bride, Lily, whose eyes widened in fear. She finally understood the gravity of the mistake. Ethan placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder and said calmly, "Continue the wedding. We will talk later," but those words carried more weight than shouting ever could. The ceremony resumed, but joy was gone. The bride's family sat stiffly, smiles frozen, Vanessa now seated beside Ethan at the main table. Felt eyes burning into her from all directions, some with regret, some with fear, some with envy. She remained composed. Because true strength never needs to boast. Ethan leaned closer and whispered that everything would be handled after tonight. Vanessa nodded, trusting him completely, because she knew when Ethan went quiet, consequences followed, not out of cruelty, but justice. The bride. Lily's cousin tried to apologize mid-ceremony, whispering excuses about misunderstandings, but Ethan ignored him. Completely a punishment far worse than anger. Meanwhile, phones buzzed as important guests quietly checked messages, unaware that emails were already being sent, contracts already being reviewed, partnerships already being questioned. Ethan had stepped away earlier, not for a simple call, but to approve decisions that now took on a different meaning. The families who laughed earlier now felt an invisible rope tightening around their futures, because many of their businesses depended on banks, land, permits, and logistics firms owned by Ethan. Though they never knew the name behind the power, they were about to learn that lesson soon. The wedding music played, but every note sounded hollow as Karma prepared to walk onto the stage, wearing silence and patience, and when the final vows were spoken, nothing could stop what was already in motion. The moment the ceremony ended, relief washed over some faces, but fear settled deeper in others. Because the tension had not passed, it had only paused. As guests moved toward the reception hall, whispers followed Ethan and Vanessa like shadows. People tried to guess who he was, searching memories of business meetings and boardrooms, trying to connect the call man to unseen power, the bride's father. Mr. Hawthorne forced confidence as he approached Ethan, holding a glass raised in fake warmth, welcoming him as family. Ethan accepted the greeting politely, but said little. Vanessa noticed how the man's hand trembled slightly as he spoke, and how his eyes kept darting around, calculating damage control. Dinner was served, but conversations died whenever. Ethan shifted in his chair, servers moved faster, sensing hierarchy. Instinctively, the bride. Lily finally gathered courage and approached Vanessa, her voice shaking as she apologized, saying she did not know Vanessa. Listened quietly, then said softly, "Respect should never depend on knowledge." Lily nodded, tears forming, because she understood too late that kindness should come before status nearby. Adrian confronted his in-laws' anger, barely contained, asking how they could humiliate his brother's wife. The bride's mother tried to defend herself, saying appearances matter. Adrian cut her off, saying character matters more, and in that moment, the family fracture became visible. Ethan stood and tapped his glass gently. Not to toast, but to excuse himself as he did. Phones across the hall vibrated. Simultaneously, business partners, investors, and officials reading messages about postponed approvals, delayed funding, and sudden audits. No threats, no explanations, just silence and suspension. The Hawthorne family patriarch checked his phone, color draining from his face as he read that the bank had frozen a crucial loan. Another relative received noticed that a land lease renewal was under review. Panic spread like poison. Ethan had not named himself yet, but his presence was already dismantling arrogance. Vanessa watched quietly, understanding that this was not revenge born of ego, but consequence. Born of truth. Guests who earlier laughed now avoided eye contact. Some approached Vanessa with forced friendliness, others slipped out early, citing emergencies. The wedding that was meant to announce alliance and power now revealed fragility. Adrian returned to Ethan, asking what he had done. Ethan replied, "Nothing that was not already." Written choices always write their endings. As night deepened, the Hawthorne family gathered in a corner, arguing, blaming one another, their masks fully fallen. Lily sat alone, makeup streaked, realizing that her family's pride had cost her peace. Ethan finally spoke to Adrian privately, promising to protect him from fallout because he had shown respect from the start. Vanessa held Ethan's hand, feeling not triumph, but sadness, because she knew humiliation teaches. lessons but also leaves scars, and as the last guest departed, the hall stood silent. Stripped of laughter, leaving only echoes of arrogance shattered by quiet dignity. Morning arrived heavy and unforgiving for the Hawthorne family because consequences do not sleep. The first call came before sunrise. When the bride's father was informed that a long-promised government permit would be delayed indefinitely, no reason given, just a polite notice that reviews were ongoing, he tried calling contacts only to find phones unanswered, doors suddenly closed. Meanwhile, news traveled quietly through boardrooms that Ethan Cole had reactivated dormant clauses and paused strategic partnerships. No drama, no announcements, just absence. And in the world of power, absence is louder than threats. Vanessa woke beside Ethan, sensing the calm before storms. She asked if things would worsen. Ethan replied, "Truth reveals what was already weak." Adrian arrived later that day, exhausted, apologetic, and torn between love and blood. Ethan reassured him again that his marriage would not suffer because of others' pride, but boundaries would be clear. Lily struggled under the weight of her family's disgrace. Relatives blamed her for not controlling seating arrangements. Some accused her of marrying above her place, while others begged her to ask Ethan for mercy. She refused, realizing that mercy demanded humility, not desperation. Vanessa visited Lily privately, offering comfort, not superiority. She said, "I sat with staff because they thought I belonged there, but worth is not assigned by chairs." Lily broke down, admitting she had grown up believing status defines safety. Vanessa replied, "Kindness defines legacy." Those words stayed with Lily as storms continued. The Hawthorne businesses lost suppliers' credit, tightened investors withdrew quietly. No scandals, just erosion. Friends vanished, allies distanced themselves, and invitations stopped coming. The same people who laughed at a simple dress now feared simple emails. Ethan attended meetings calmly, never mentioning the wedding once, letting silence educate better than lectures. Vanessa returned to her routine, volunteering, reading, cooking, living the same humble life because power did not change who she was, and that consistency unsettled people more than anger. Rumors spread, finally connecting the dots, realizing that the quiet man at the wedding was the unseen pillar of Leth. The city respect for Vanessa grew not from fear, but from realization that dignity had protected her long before wealth ever could. Adrian stood by his brother, openly rejecting his in-laws' excuses, choosing loyalty to integrity over convenience. Lily slowly rebuilt herself, distancing from toxic pride-seeking growth instead of defense, and in quiet moments she thanked Vanessa for not striking back publicly because private lessons cut deeper. By the end of the week, the Hawthorne family requested a formal meeting. Ethan agreed not to punish, but to conclude. They arrived, humbled voices, low eyes down, no accusations, no arguments, just acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Ethan listened, then said, "Wealth hides nothing, character reveals everything." The meeting ended without applause, without threats, only understanding that power bows to humility, and as doors closed behind them, the final lesson settled. Some weddings unite families, others expose them, and this one did. Both. Time moved forward, but the memory of that night refused to fade because lessons carved by humility linger longer than scars. The Hawthorne family tried rebuilding their image, hosting charity events, smiling for cameras, but doors remained only half open because trust, once cracked, never seals the same. Lily watched her parents struggle with identities built on status alone, and for the first time, she understood how fragile their world had always been. Adrian focused on protecting his marriage, choosing honesty over appearances. He and Lily moved into a smaller home, away from family pressure, learning to live without borrowed pride. Vanessa and Ethan were rarely mentioned publicly, yet their influence was felt everywhere. Contracts stabilized only where respect had been practiced. Employees across Ethan companies spoke of an invisible standard that had quietly risen, treating people better because stories travel faster than rules. Vanessa continued living, simply shopping at local stores, speaking kindly to workers who now recognized her, not for wealth but grace. Some apologized for past Judgments she forgave without ceremony. It's because peace mattered more than memory. One afternoon, the same wedding coordinator who had directed her to the staff chairs visited Vanessa, trembling with shame, offering apologies. Vanessa listened and said, "Learn to look at people twice before you place them once." That sentence became the woman's turning point. She later changed how she treated everyone regardless of role, because one moment can rewrite a lifetime. Ethan watched these ripples, knowing power used gently reshapes more than force ever could. Lily requested another meeting, not to beg, but to understand. Vanessa welcomed her. They talked about fear, pride, and identity. Lily admitted she had never questioned her upbringing until it betrayed her happiness. Vanessa told her comfort zones. Feel safe until they cage you. That conversation marked Lily's rebirth. She began volunteering, quietly learning humility from action, not words. Meanwhile, the Hawthorne patriarch finally admitted defeat, stepping back from leadership, realizing that arrogance had blinded him. His empire shrank, but his conscience awakened, something money never bought. The city slowly adjusted to a new truth that influence without integrity collapses, and humility carries weight. Unseen, Ethan and Vanessa attended fewer events, preferring private dinners, walks, and shared silence because they never needed applause to wedding. That began with humiliation ended as a quiet legend retold in offices, homes, and whispered warnings reminding everyone that power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in a simple dress, sits quietly, and waits for the world to reveal itself. Months passed, and the city slowly forgot the spectacle but remembered the lesson, because stories that carry truth never truly disappear. They settle into behavior, into choices, into hesitation before judgment. The Hawthorne name no longer opened doors automatically. It now required explanation and effort. Something they had never practiced before. Lily transformed under that pressure, shedding inherited arrogance and discovering resilience. She stood up to her family, defending boundaries, choosing growth even when it meant distance. Adrian supported her, fully proud of the woman she was becoming rather than the status she once represented. Vanessa observed this transformation, quietly understanding that real change is slow, uncomfortable, and rarely dramatic. Ethan adjusted his investments not to punish, but to align with values, choosing partners who treated people well from the start. Companies that once relied on shortcuts now learned standards as employees felt safer speaking up. Cultures shifted subtly. The wedding humiliation became an internal case study, whispered in leadership meetings, not as gossip, but caution. Vanessa was invited to speak at a small women's group about dignity. She declined fame but agreed to share, privately telling them that humility is not weakness, it is clarity, that wealth without kindness is noise. That message traveled further than any stage. Lily attended one of those sessions, anonymously, sitting among strangers, listening, realizing she was finally learning without titles. Later, she thanked Vanessa again, saying, "You changed me without attacking me." Vanessa replied, "You changed yourself. I just held a mirror." The Hawthorne mother attempted reconciliation, inviting Vanessa to a family gathering. Vanessa accepted, not for validation, but closure. The meeting was awkward. Apologies stumbled and silence lingered, but seeds of humility were planted. The woman who once laughed now listened. Ethan remained calm, supportive, never demanding respect, but receiving it naturally, because it was finally understood the city economy stabilized under quieter leadership and fewer egos. Young professionals shared the story online, reshaping how success was defined, not by clothes or seating, but by conduct. Vanessa and Ethan continued walking side by side, unchanged by recognition, because their strength had always been internal. And when asked privately why he never revealed his power sooner, Ethan said, "Respect that depends on disclosure is not respect." The humiliation had ended, but its echo lived on, guiding unseen choices, reminding people to look twice, listen longer, and judge less, because you never know who is sitting quietly beside you. ****. The final truth of that wedding revealed itself not in wealth lost or pride broken, but in lives redirected, because endings are not explosions, they are shifts. Vanessa and Ethan never spoke publicly about that. Night yet its shadow softened, hearts sharpened. Awareness and reshaped futures. The Hawthorne family learned to rebuild without entitlement, measuring success by stability rather than applause. Lily and Adrian grew stronger, choosing a partnership rooted in respect. Instead of performance, their marriage no longer a display but a shelter. Adrian often said losing status saved his soul. Vanessa became a quiet reference point in conversations when people spoke of dignity. Someone would say, "Remember the woman in the simple dress, Ethan?" Watch these changes, knowing that power exercised without noise leaves the deepest mark. Years later, a young woman at a different wedding stood up when staff were mistreated because she remembered a story her mother once told her about a woman seated among servers who changed everything. That was the legacy. Not fear, not dominance, but awareness. Vanessa never sought revenge, yet justice followed her because humility aligns with truth. The city evolved slightly, kinder slightly, slower to judge, slightly more careful with assumptions, and in a world addicted to appearances. That was a revolution. The wedding hall was renovated. Chandeliers replaced carpets. Changed, but those who knew remembered where. Arrogance fell and grace rose. Vanessa and Ethan continued there. Simple life, proving daily that the most powerful people do not announce themselves. They arrive, quietly observe, patiently, and let the world reveal its character. First, because sometimes the most humble people do not just hold power, they redefine it.